Hello and a very good afternoon to all News9 viewers. I'm Neha Bhan. Let's take a look at some of the top national and international stories of this hour. We begin with the national capital of Delhi continues to be choking with the air quality index plunging to close to 500. Now, this is the third consecutive day when the AQI has remained in the severe category. Making matters worse, the smog tower in the Connaught Place area continues to be inoperative. Delhi's Lieutenant Governor V.K. Saxena called an emergency meeting on the air pollution crisis and asked the government to step up efforts to control the emissions. The meeting, however, was not attended by Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, who was not in the city. The governor has urged public to remain indoors as far as possible, avoid unnecessary travel and, if necessary, to use public transport so as to ensure a lesser volume of traffic and therefore reduced emissions and dust pollution. There is also a recommendation of allowing the use of only BS6 vehicles in the Delhi NCR region. Water sprinkles and anti-smog guns are being deployed in double shifts in an effort to minimize the air crisis. Now let's give you an account of the most polluted cities from across the world. Aksu in China is the most polluted city in the world with a staggering AQI of 1,234. New Delhi comes in on the third on this particular list with an AQI of 557. It is followed by Hapur, India, Meerut, India, Faridabad, India and Hisar, India. Following Delhi, there are a total of 10 other Indian cities which make it to the list. There on your screens, these cities include adjoining, Noida, Faridabad and Ghaziabad. And here is an AQI comparison of all the metropolitan cities of India. While Delhi reeled under severe AQI at 385 or now 500 in some parts, Kolkata and Mumbai were slightly better at AQI 168 and 155 respectively. The air quality in southern cities, however, remained good, with Chennai at AQI 57 and Bengaluru at 37. New Delhi, there are 385, Kolkata 168, Mumbai 155, Chennai 57 and Bengaluru 37. The national capital continues the air quality in the national capital continues to deteriorate. The air quality index plunging to close to 500. Rituals at the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya are all set to begin today. The Sri Ram Janmabhoomi Tirath Kshetra Trust has organized an Akshat Puja ceremony for the consecration of the Ram Mandir. The ceremony is set to be held on a grand scale. 1,000 kilograms of rice will be mixed with turmeric and ghee and distributed to 200 volunteers who will then distribute it across the country. 200 workers from 100 places across India have come to Ayodhya for the puja. 100 copper-made kalash have been brought in, which the special prasad will be filled, and these kalash will be handed over to the volunteers. Additionally, leaflets in regional languages will be distributed along with the rice. The trust will also distribute rice to families in Ayodhya and encourage them to share it with their relatives in neighboring districts. The aim is to spread awareness about the consecration ceremony and involve the masses. This particular ceremony is scheduled to be held on the 22nd of January next year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also expected to attend the ceremony. Now, India has released an emergency contact number for Indians who require urgent assistance after an earthquake of magnitude 6.4 struck western Nepal on Friday night, resulting in the deaths of at least 157 people and over a dozen injuries. The official said the toll is expected to rise. The rescue workers in Nepal began digging through the rubble of collapsed houses with their bare hands on Saturday, searching for survivors after the country's worst earthquake in 8 years. Both Nepal Army and Nepal police personnel have been mobilized to carry out rescue works. Thousands of villagers in the mountains of northwestern Nepal slept outdoors Saturday night in the bitter cold. Most of the houses in villages in Jajarkot district either collapsed or were severely damaged by the sudden earthquake which hit the country on Friday night. Earlier, Nepal Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal visited the affected regions in order to assess the situation.
हामी लास उठाउन लाग्छौं के एकछिन
बढी नखसोस् है प्रेम आउन
Now, Bhutan king undertook a jeep safari inside Kaziranga National Park, famous for one-horned rhinos, on Saturday afternoon and had a glimpse of the diverse wildlife at the park. The king also witnessed elephant mahoth bonding during elephant bathing, a new attraction added for the tourists in Kaziranga. Take a look.
That's not so nice, huh?
The Bhutan king is on an 8-day visit to India, and he now there visited Kaziranga National Park, which is famous for one-horned rhinos, on Saturday afternoon. Let's get you the latest from war zone Israel. It's day 30th of the Israel-Hamas war, and there seems to be no end to the fighting in sight. Let's give you an update on all the major happenings on the war front as of day 30. The death toll on the Palestinian side has now risen to 9,227. This is as per the Gaza Health Ministry, and on the Israeli side, the death toll is over 1,400, while the number of injured is nearing the 5,500 mark. 1.4 million people have been displaced in the Gazan enclave, while on the Israeli side, the number of displaced is 250,000. Close to 400 trucks till now have gone into Gaza carrying relief material. Last Saturday, in fact, was when aid was allowed to pass through the Rafah crossing. 247 soldiers and civilians still remain as hostages with Hamas, while 4 hostages have been released and 1 has been rescued. Now, Turkish President Erdogan said Gaza must be part of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state once the Israel-Hamas war is over, and Ankara will not support any plans gradually erasing Palestinians from history. Erdogan made the remarks a day before US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was due to arrive in Ankara for talks on Gaza. That's a big remark made by the Turkish president. There he says that Gaza must be a part of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state once the Israel-Hamas war is over. United States President Joe Biden said on the 4th of November that progress had been made on securing a so-called humanitarian pause in the fighting between Israel and Hamas. President Joe Biden on Saturday said yes when asked by reporters whether any progress has been made on the prospect of a humanitarian pause in the conflict in Gaza. Listen in.
Mr. President, any progress on the humanitarian pause?
Yes.
Rashida Tlaib said you support genocide. What do you think?
Interestingly, his statement comes after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected US calls for a humanitarian pause in the Gaza region. Netanyahu explicitly stated that there is no ceasefire with Hamas until hostages are freed. He also stressed that Israel refuses to any temporary ceasefire that does not include release of hostages. Pro-Palestinian protesters took to the streets in several cities including London, Berlin, Paris, Ankara, Istanbul and Washington. They demanded a ceasefire in Gaza and criticized Israel for escalating its military operations against Hamas. On Saturday in Washington, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters gathered outside the White House amidst the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. They called for a ceasefire in Gaza, waving Palestinian flags, holding signs and chanting slogans against United States President Joe Biden. Listening. Central Sydney, hundreds of Palestinian supporters came together urging a ceasefire to stop the violence in Gaza. These protesters assembled in Hyde Park unfurled a massive Palestinian flag, held signs, carried dolls symbolizing the victims, and then marched through the city. Thousands of pro-Palestinian demonstrators took to the streets in Toronto and Ottawa calling for an urgent ceasefire in Gaza. On the 30th of October, Canada's foreign minister once again emphasized the need for a humanitarian pause in the Gaza conflict. The minister also mentioned the urgency of evacuating Canadians and hostages from the region while also providing essential aid. Hundreds of people took to the streets to express their support for the Palestinians in Gaza. They waved Palestinian flags and strongly criticized Israel, accusing it of carrying out genocide in the ongoing attacks on the Palestinian Strip. Across the globe, thousands of demonstrators have been marching in various cities over the last few days as Israel has escalated its airstrikes on the besieged Gaza Strip since the 7th of October. Visuals coming in from Venezuela and Chile. Waving Palestinian flags and chanting "Free Palestine" and "Israel is a terrorist state," hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters took to the streets of Manhattan. The New York protest was one of the pro-Palestinian rallies around the world calling for a ceasefire and castigating Israel after its military intensified its assault on Hamas. Similar protests occurred in London, Berlin, Paris, Ankara, Istanbul and Washington, D.C. In Paris, demonstrators held Palestinian flags with slogans like "Stop the massacres" and "Ceasefire now." This rally in Paris on Saturday was one of the first large gatherings in support of Palestinians legally allowed in the city since Hamas attacked Israel on the 7th of October. In Berlin, over 6,000 people attended the rally, according to the police. In Berlin, there are thousands gathered in a pro-Palestine protest urging a ceasefire in Gaza. The police reported over 6,000 attendees at the rally. One of the protesters there called for an immediate halt to the bombings and an end to the ethnic cleansing happening in Gaza. He also mentioned that the demonstrators were advocating for a one-state solution. Protesters took to the streets in Istanbul and Ankara, targeting the United States and Israel. These demonstrations occurred just a day before the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's planned visit to Turkey, while the conflict in Gaza escalated. A State Department spokesperson confirmed Blinken's visit to Turkey on Saturday, marking his second trip to the Middle East within a month. In London, thousands of protesters gathered calling for a ceasefire in Gaza as Israel escalated its military offensive against Hamas in the Palestinian enclave. Now, this marked the fourth protest held since Hamas initiated its attack on Israel on the 7th of October. The demonstrators marched from, circus to square, with some displaying signs that read "Stop bombing children" and "Ceasefire now." Arab leaders publicly pressured the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Saturday to secure an immediate ceasefire in Gaza hours after Palestinians said an Israeli airstrike killed at least 15 people in an UN-run school being used as a shelter. In a rare open display of disagreement, the top US diplomat pushed back as he stood next to the Jordanian and Egyptian counterparts at a press conference, saying a ceasefire would only let Hamas terrorists regroup.
We come together here today sharing the same fundamental interest and objective: to end this conflict in a way that ensures lasting peace and security in the region. We may have different views and positions on certain necessary steps to achieve that objective, but today we reaffirmed our individual commitments to continuing to work toward that end. Our joint efforts have also been critical in increasing the flow of humanitarian assistance to Gaza. I'm particularly grateful to Egypt for its significant effort to facilitate a mechanism with Israel and with the United Nations to do just that. Each day, more than 100 trucks are moving to Rafah, up from 0 just a little over a week ago. But that is not nearly enough. Today, we spoke about ways to accelerate and expand the sustained delivery of aid. Israel must take every possible measure to prevent civilian casualties. In my meetings with Israeli officials yesterday, I conveyed additional steps that they can and should take to do just that. Protecting civilians will help prevent Hamas from further exploiting the situation. But most important, it's simply the right and moral thing to do. When I see a Palestinian boy or girl pulled from the wreckage of a building, it hits me in the gut, just as it hits everyone in the gut. And I see my own children in their faces. And as human beings, how can any of us not feel the same way? What we have to do, more than anything else, all of us, everyone concerned, is to prevent the dehumanization.
A French military airplane carrying 18 tons of humanitarian aid for Gaza took off on Saturday to Egypt. From Egypt, the plane will be taken into the Palestinian enclave. Among the key supplies it carries are medicine, food and generators meant to elevate the plight of civilians in the besieged Gaza Strip. As per reports, close to 400 aid trucks have till now went into Gaza as the humanitarian crisis continued to deepen in the Strip. Just last Saturday, Israel allowed aid to enter the Rafah crossing, and now a French military airplane carrying 18 tons of humanitarian aid has taken off to Egypt, and from Egypt the plane will be taken into the Palestinian enclave. Several hospitals in Gaza are running dangerously low on various essential supplies. People have lost their everything. Every little aid matters a great deal for these people. Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, in an interview to the Time magazine, has asserted that it is difficult to overthrow her government through a democratic system. This statement from Prime Minister Hasina comes after she appeared on the cover of the Time magazine. The headline on the magazine cover read, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and the fate of democracy in Bangladesh. The edition of the magazine is set to hit the stands on the 10th of November. Sheikh Hasina will be looking for a third straight term in the Prime Minister's office as Bangladesh goes to polls in January next year. According to the excerpts released by the news outlet, Hasina said, and I quote, "I'm confident that my people are with me. They are my main strength and it is not that easy to overthrow me through a democratic system. The only option is just to eliminate me and I'm ready to die for my people." Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been facing protests back home as several groups, mainly supported by the opposition party BNP, have called for her resignation and asked her to allow a caretaker government to conduct the elections. Germany's Hamburg airport became inoperational on Saturday night over a hostage situation as an armed man with a child in his vehicle breached security and fired shots on the premises. The airport closed for all takeoffs and landings shortly after the incident and around 8 p.m. local time. The car with a 35-year-old man and 4-year-old child was parked under a plane, a police spokesperson said, and officers were at the scene with large presence late on Saturday. Russia's defense ministry on Sunday announced that their new nuclear-powered submarine, Imperator Alexander III, carried out a successful test launch of the Bulava ballistic missile designed to carry nuclear warheads. The defense ministry also shared in a statement that firing a ballistic missile is the final element of the state tests, after which a decision will be made to accept the cruiser into the Navy. President Vladimir Putin has been pushing for Russia to maintain its nuclear deterrent to counter what he calls growing security threats, as ties between Moscow and the West have hit new lows over the war Russia launched in Ukraine in the year 2022. There has been a significant surge in the smuggling of people at the eastern border of the European Union. An increasing number of migrants are attempting to enter the EU through the Baltic route. There are suspicions that Russian and Belarusian leaders may be exploiting these migrants for their own strategic purposes. Take a look to know more.
Different uniforms, the same aim: securing the border between Latvia and Belarus. For the past 2 months, Latvian border guards and the country's military have been patrolling the EU external border. That's because there has been a surge in illegal crossings. Latvia, an EU country, is currently a prime destination for migrants from Syria, Afghanistan and several African countries who enter from Belarus. Authorities estimate that more than 11,000 people have been intercepted so far this year, more than ever before.
This crossing point is closed and has been secured. There is no traffic passing through here anymore. But Latvia's border with Belarus is almost 173 kilometers long.
80 kilometers of that are now protected by this fence. It's been built in the last few months and it's being extended. But it's not enough to deter everyone.
They try to climb over the fence. Some of them, they are trying to dig under the fence. So there are still quite many cases when they try to damage the fence. They are very creative and trying to use all the opportunities and ways to get in.
Attention, attention. The police inform.
Authorities say it's a coordinated effort. It's not the first time they've seen something like this. 2 years ago, thousands of migrants stormed the border between Belarus and Poland. It was allegedly encouraged by Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko as a way to exert pressure on the EU in retaliation for sanctions on Belarus. Most of the migrants were headed to Western European countries like Germany, which are still favored destinations. German authorities say that now migrants are being smuggled on a route through Turkey, via Russia, and from there on to Belarus, and then into the EU.
Lukashenko
is playing the same deceitful game as Putin. We have to watch this carefully, especially with Belarus, which is de facto dependent on Russia. Both are using migration as a weapon to tear our society apart and destabilize Europe.
People who manage to cross into Latvia are picked up and driven to Germany by car for $1,600 per person. That's according to Latvian media. Those caught attempting to cross are returned to Belarus, a policy criticized by human rights organizations. On some days in September, as many as 100 people attempted to illegally cross into Latvia. That's unlikely to change soon.
We would like to be optimistic, but we still have to be realists. And the situation currently, there is no any sign about possible improvement.
In the meantime, Lithuania and Estonia have sent reinforcements to Latvia to help secure the EU eastern border.
Descendants of tribal leaders executed by German colonial forces are demanding the repatriation of the skulls of the deceased individuals believed to be held in a Berlin museum. Among the victims was Mangi Meli, a prominent leader of the Chaga tribe who fiercely opposed the German colonial presence. Take a look.
The town of Moshi, on the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro, is home to the Chaga tribe. Isaria Meli's grandfather was Mangi Meli, leader of the Chaga when they fought German colonists, but lost. Several years later, the Germans hanged Meli and others, thinking they were going to rebel again. They took several schools back to Germany.
What
was done to Mangi Meli, to me and my family, we are not satisfied. It planted fear into our lives. This act wasn't normal. It was an act of great violence that was done to us. And that is why we have not lived in peace all these years.
This museum tells Mangi Meli's story, his leadership of the Chaga tribe and his rebellion against the Germans. The fact that the Germans not only executed him, but beheaded him and took his school to Berlin means a normal grave will not be an option, even if the school is returned.
We have decided that after its return, his skull will not be buried in the ground, because his body was not legally buried. His body was laid to rest without proper rites, and where he was laid, he cannot be seen. Therefore, we believe his spirit is not at peace, and we are looking at a place where he will be commemorated.
Mangi Meli used to own all this land here, as he was chief of the Chaga tribe. It is now owned by his grandson and his generations. That tree there was where the German colonizers hung him and 18 others. Zabron Kiwelu's grandfather was among those killed here. His school is also in Germany. A DNA test has confirmed the relationship. Kiwelu wants more than just the school. He also wants compensation.
We request that the Tanzanian government take a firm stance to ensure that the German government pays us. If the government maintains this stance, we could be paid even today.
Isaria went to Germany to take a DNA test, but says officials there could not find a school with a link. His 50-year-old fight to find his grandfather's remains and bring them home continues.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Bulletin. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day ahead.